The other thing I'd like to talk about tonight, just briefly, is that very recently I was invited to a National Indian Law Conference at the Sandra Day O'Connor Law School at Arizona State University. I was invited to participate on a panel that will be discussing the impact of land going from fee to trust, the impact on local governments. I was invited by Carl Artman, who is a former Oneida tribal attorney. And Carl Artman, Mr. Artman, is also a former director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I can tell you that Mr. Artman and I have 180-degree different legal and political perspectives. But the wonderful thing is that we have a mutual respect for each other, and we can communicate and dialogue in spite of disagreements and different points of view. And so I have been very appreciative of that invitation. So this time next week, I will be at the Sandra Day O'Connor Law School. And for that, I prepared a little PowerPoint presentation on fee to trust, because I'll use the analogy that almost any policy or regulation in our whole society starts with a benign intent. And if used excessively or abused, it becomes a problem. The prohibition is gone, everybody can drink. We can all drink. But in most states, when that's to excess or abuse, we've now established a 0.10 blood alcohol level, that if you choose to drink, you best not be behind the wheel. When laws and policies are put into place and then abused, that's a problem. And sort of the theme of the conversation I'm going to have, and mind you, I'm probably the only non-tribal person and non-attorney that will be there next week. I plan to be very frank and straightforward because we need to solve these problems. I believe that the Indian Reorganization Act, which established the ability of the Secretary of Interior to take lands from the state and place them into federal trust in 1934, I believe that was a benign intent. And so, Andrew, if you have that power presentation,
I'll try to, can you hear me if I just talk without the microphone? Okay, this is an early map of 1825 of the Wisconsin Territory, and there was major Indian territory in the Wisconsin Territory. You can flip, we're going to move through this very quickly. This is 1838, just a boundary of the 65,400 acres of the Treaty of 1838 that was made with the First Christian and Orchard Party of the New York Unites. That's the 65,400 acre original boundary. That increase that you just saw by 1892 was entirely allotted out under the General Allotment Act to individual tribal members, and the fee patented for the most part by 1892 and certainly by the 1920s. All but about 84 acres of the 65,004 was totally patented out, and the members of that Treaty of 1838, the New York and the First Christian and Orchard parties were Wisconsin citizens from 1892 until 1936, and then of course in 1924 when all American Indian Indians were citizens. In our research for the cases that Mr. Kowalkowski is going to talk to you about, in some of the historical research, we found some interesting things, and this one really caught my eye, and I'm taking it to the conference because of the definition. I'll read it to the first part. 1909 is a federal district court case that says, as the USB calls this, it further appears by the statutes of the state, the former Oneida Reservation has been divided into 2 townships with provisions for 2 local government. This is 102 years ago. A federal district court judge says the former reservation is now 2 townships. And from approximately 1892 until 1936, the only jurisdiction in this area was the state of Wisconsin and Brown County. Until 1908 came the village of town of Hobart, and 1910 came the town of Oneida. So there was no federal jurisdiction, only state and county and town jurisdiction for almost 40 years, 1892 to 1936. In 1936, the federal government recognized the Oneida Tribe of Indians of Wisconsin and started helping them acquire land. Oh wait, back to this one just a moment. Here's the thing that I thought was a phenomenal piece. It says, if the theory of government, and this is the best definition of feeder trust I've ever seen, if the theory of government here presented were to be adopted, we should have this anomalous situation. A quarter section occupied by a white man would be under the jurisdiction of the state, while the next quarter section occupied by an Indian allotee would fall under the federal jurisdiction. There would be two rules of conduct which might be entirely different, operating at the same time upon the same township according to the complexion of the inhabitants. This was 1909. Two rules of conduct which might be entirely different, operating at the same time upon the same township according to the complexion of the inhabitants. This amounts to a reductio ad absurdum. It's a Latin term. Reductio ad. That was this judge's view in 1909. He said, are you kidding? They have federal jurisdiction on this parcel and state jurisdiction on this parcel. Reductio ad absurdum. Best definition I've ever seen for feeder trust. That was 1909. Indian Reorganization Act came along in 1934 and created exactly that. Townships, every single Indian reservation in this country is located within a county, one or two counties, many within towns. And we have been struggling with this process, this problem. So getting back to the benign use of a well-intended policy, when the Indian Reorganization Act occurred and the ability of the Secretary of Interior to acquire land for the tribal governments that they were recognizing. When that land was acquired for a purpose, I consider that a benign use. When the tribe acquires a parcel because they want to build homes or schools or big jobs or have a museum or even a casino, whatever it is, when the tribe acquires some land and uses that land for the betterment of the tribal people, I don't believe there would be any objection. But when a tribe acquires a land, lets it lay fallow, just keeps acquiring land, does not use it for the benefit of the people, it becomes strategic acquisition, which truly impacts the co-located government. And there is no Indian reservation in this country that isn't also located in a county and very near towns or co-located with towns. So we have this federal jurisdiction, state jurisdiction, and there are 1,061 Hobarts in the country. If we just look at a single parcel taken from the state tax base and based in federal trust, will create a minimum of property tax laws, land use planning disruption, zoning conflicts, jurisdictional confusion, water infrastructure conflicts, lost business, economic development opportunities, and neighborhood estrangements. I've watched this neighborhood estrangements in many areas, and it's a sad thing because the kids all went to school together of every culture. Kids grew up together of every culture, and it was neighbors, and there just were no problems. But suddenly we have this political divisiveness escalating through feeder trust, and neighbors are uncomfortable with each other. So how can you get this? How about this? And neighborhood estrangement happens. That's tough on any community. So, here's the strategic land acquisition. The land acquired from placement in the federal trust are intended to disrupt When land is acquired by a tribal government, whether it's this one or another one, doesn't matter. But when land is acquired by a tribal government to strategically disrupt or diminish the authority of a co-located government, that is a strategic acquisition, and the impact on the community is dramatic. Okay, next. The difference between random is acquiring parcels to serve an intended tribal purpose, and the purpose is completed. I believe all of us would support that. I believe if the Indian Reorganization Act, deed of trust process were used for exactly that purpose, we're going to acquire this land for our people, we're going to put these resources on this land for our people. I believe everybody around would applaud. I don't believe we would object to that. Strategic parcels acquired to intentionally thwart other non-tribal government activities with no tribal use accomplished on the land. Those are my two broad definitions. I support the one, I oppose the other. Examples of random deed of trust in 1950. My technology varies. In 1950, the land acquisition was moving about like this for the United. It was quite slow, but the land that was acquired was being utilized. So we can flip to the next one. This is a whole 65,400 acres by 1975, and the land was being acquired a little better and being utilized. This is 1979. It doesn't really show you the land breakdown very well. But let's move to Brown Camp. This is the town of Hobart in 1990. This is half of the former reservation. And you can see where by 1990, the gaming is building up. The revenues and the ability of the tribe to do things has really ratcheted up. And the lands, this is Allegheny County. Right now, Allegheny County, the dark squares are owned by the United Tribe. Nearly half of the other half of the reservation in Allegheny County. Here's another example of the strategic acquisition for fee land in federal trust. This is Hobart in 2008. The red are parcels that are already out of the tax base and into tax-exempt federal trust status. The blue are parcels packaged up just under 3,000 acres to be removed from the Hobart tax base and placed in federal trust. Of the red is about 1,581 acres right now. And the blue is about 3,000 acres. So next slide. The village of Hobart, 1,581 acres in federal trust, 338.59 additional acres owned in fee but paying taxes. Total of 5,448 acres owned by the United Tribe in Hobart. About 25% of Hobart today. This acreage right here is paying taxes. And this acreage right here, we are objecting to every single acre going into trust. We have appealed and objected, and for the years that we object, the taxes erode. It's in our best interest to keep on objecting until we get some problems solved between co-located governments. So we will always object to any more land going into trust, particularly when the land is not being used to upgrade the quality of life for tribal members. And particularly used when it is strategic, absolutely strategic. I'll give you another example. Flip back to that big one if you will. Yeah, there you go. This, down here in the southern Hobart area, years ago before I came here, some of you may recall when the village was building a business industrial park. And they expended some money, about $4 million, to have an industrial park. They built a boulevard, O'Hare Boulevard up there. And then they kind of woke up to read the paper one morning that the tribe had acquired 75% of the land in that industrial park and said, we're not building anything. That was a strategic acquisition to thwart the local government. So that prompted the village to go up and buy the acreage at Centennial. The village bought the acreage at Centennial, and the tribe bought an unbuildable thing we call a spike strip to stop the village from being able to get its sewer across the Centennial. That is strategic land acquisition, not for the benefit of the tribe, but for the diminishment of the representative government here. And we are confronting that, quite frankly. The railroad is contested. The tribe claims that they own, or if they own the railroad. We think differently, let our attorney talk about that. The golf course has been kind of a mixed thing, because we really are happy with the present owner of the golf course and the way the golf course is working. We wish them every success. We succeeded in keeping restrictive covenants on that golf course, so it must always remain a golf course, and it must always stay in the tax base. Beyond that, we wish them well. That's making great use of their property, and that's creating jobs for tribal people. And we think that's a wonderful thing, and we very much support the Thornberry Creek Golf Course and Restaurant there in every way we can. We do treat, regarding a liquor license, we treat that liquor license the way any other liquor license is. If you owe Hobart something, you pay up to get your liquor license. So that's just the way that is. So that's just a little mini version of the presentation I'm going to be giving in Arizona.
I hope I live to tell a tale. The relationship that I have with Mr. Armin, a person who vigorously disagrees with my perspectives, and we're sitting on two sides of a very difficult issue. But that mutual respect is a relationship I also have with a great number of local Oneida tribal members here. And so some of you received in your mail a very extensive spending postcard just before the elections. There are a couple of folks that would rather not speak to me, would rather I'm not here, and that enjoy personally trashing me, and so be it, they have that right. But I want you as Hobart residents to know that I have many, many tribal friends that I deeply respect, and they respect me, and we all want to solve these problems. So thank you very much.